Welcome to the video on our channel, Celebrity Spotlight. Today, we'll examine in detail the extraordinary life of the legendary Vivien Leigh, an actress who enthralled audiences with her mesmerizing beauty, fierce talent, and haunting vulnerability. Best known around the world as the iconic Southern belle Scarlett O'Hara, Vivien's real-life story was more dramatic, more complex, and in many ways more tragic than any of her on-screen roles. Born in 1913 amidst the misty hills of Darjeeling, India, her path to becoming one of Hollywood's most revered stars was shaped by both brilliance and deep emotional struggle. From an early age, Vivien was uprooted from her home and sent to boarding school in England. Just 6 years old, she endured the pain of being separated from her mother for 2 full years, which planted the seeds of emotional distance that would quietly affect her for the rest of her life. Even then, she confided to school friends that she would one day become a famous actress. That sense of destiny would become a driving force, though it came with great personal cost. In the early 1930s, still just a teenager, Vivien became enamored with Herbert Lee Holman, a quiet, older barrister 13 years her senior. Despite her success at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, she abandoned her formal training to marry Holman in December 1932. The marriage, though briefly joyful, was marred by emotional mismatch. A year later, at only 19, she gave birth to their daughter, Suzanne. But the pull of her passion for the stage proved stronger than domestic life. Encouraged by an agent, Vivien began to rebuild herself, literally and figuratively. She took on Holman's middle name, Leigh, and rebranded her image, adjusting the spelling of her first name to Vivien. With that, a new identity was born, one cloaked in glamour and fire. In 1935, at the age of 22, Vivien captured attention with her breakthrough performance as Henriette in The Mask of Virtue. Her commanding presence and raw emotional intensity on stage earned both critical acclaim and controversy, but the praise was impossible to ignore. It was during this period that she first saw Laurence Olivier perform, and he made an immediate, life-altering impression on her. Although both were married, Vivien to Holman and Olivier to actress Jill Esmond, their connection was magnetic. Vivien's confidence knew no bounds. She boldly introduced herself to Olivier backstage and even kissed him on the neck, sparking a romance that would become legendary. Their affair began in secret, simmering with passion and secrecy as they both wrestled with their public images and personal responsibilities. Their chemistry blazed in the film Fire Over England, where they played opposite each other for the first time. The professional collaboration only intensified their private bond, and within a year, Olivier made the difficult decision to leave his wife and child. Vivien, too, eventually parted from Holman, though both divorces were entangled in resistance and scandal. By 1937, Vivien seemed to have it all: a rising star in cinema, a formidable talent, and a dashing, devoted partner in Olivier. But beneath the dazzling surface, cracks were beginning to form. During a performance of Hamlet, Vivien had an outburst that would later be recognized as a symptom of bipolar disorder. She screamed at Olivier mid-performance, only to instantly snap back into composure as if nothing had happened. This incident marked the beginning of a lifelong struggle with severe mental health issues that would haunt her even as her fame grew. While recovering from an ankle injury later that year, Vivien passed the time by immersing herself in Margaret Mitchell's sweeping Southern saga, Gone with the Wind. Instantly captivated, she became obsessed with playing Scarlett O'Hara. Despite skepticism from producer David O. Selznick about casting a British actress in such a quintessentially American role, Vivien pursued the part with relentless determination. Olivier later described her pursuit as demonic. Her chance finally arrived thanks to a fateful connection. Olivier's brother, an agent, arranged for her to meet Selznick in person. The moment she stepped on set during a screen test, in full costume as Atlanta burned behind her, Selznick was stunned. Vivien didn't just play Scarlett O'Hara, she became her. That moment marked the beginning of an unparalleled chapter in Vivien Leigh's life, one that would bring her global fame, critical accolades, and the first of her 2 Academy Awards. Yet even then, the shadows of mental illness, societal pressure, and personal sacrifice loomed large behind her luminous smile. Following a thrilling screen test, Selznick was left stunned by Vivien Leigh's performance. She didn't just play, Scarlett O'Hara, she embodied her with such precision and passion that the choice became undeniable. Vivien secured the role, beating out dozens of hopefuls in what was one of the most competitive casting processes in Hollywood history. The production of Gone with the Wind, however, was anything but smooth. The film's shooting schedule stretched on for months, with Vivien often working 16-hour days under intense studio lights and emotionally demanding scenes. The project was plagued by instability, cycling through 3 directors, George Cukor, Victor Fleming, and briefly Sam Wood, each bringing conflicting visions and further disrupting an already stressful set environment. Despite her tireless effort and the overwhelming burden placed on her shoulders, Vivien was paid significantly less than her co-star Clark Gable. The pay disparity reflected the industry's gender norms at the time, even though Vivien carried nearly twice the workload and was in nearly every scene. She and Gable both initially doubted the film's commercial prospects, yet they couldn't have been more wrong. Upon release, Gone with the Wind became a box office phenomenon, eventually becoming, when adjusted for inflation, the highest-grossing film of all time. The role earned Vivien the Academy Award for Best Actress, bringing her global recognition and cementing her place in cinematic history. However, the night of her Oscar win, which should have been a celebration of triumph, was tinged with personal darkness. According to Olivier's son Tarquin, Olivier was so overwhelmed with jealousy on the ride home that he later confessed to nearly striking Vivien with the statuette out of a sudden irrational fury. This unsettling episode foreshadowed tensions that would grow in their relationship. Still, in 1940, they formalized their love, divorcing their respective spouses and marrying one another. The cost of this union was steep. Both had to relinquish primary custody of their children, an emotionally devastating sacrifice that remained a quiet wound throughout their lives. Despite their efforts to find fulfillment together, even their professional collaborations began to falter. They poured over $10,000 into a stage production of Romeo and Juliet, hoping to immortalize their chemistry. Yet the play was met with critical and financial failure, and its lack of success strained both their finances and their bond. During this time, Vivien's mental health began to deteriorate rapidly. Her undiagnosed bipolar disorder evolved into severe, unpredictable episodes. Her temperament would shift dramatically, one moment sharp, angry, and intense, her voice rising and her eyes turning distant and cold. Then, just as quickly, she would return to calm, often with no memory of the outburst. These mood swings were later understood as symptoms of bipolar disorder, then known as manic depressive illness. The condition is marked by extreme emotional highs, manic phases filled with elation, impulsiveness, and frenetic energy, followed by crushing lows of depression, hopelessness, and emotional numbness. Vivien's episodes became more frequent and disruptive, damaging relationships and derailing projects. Treatments available at the time were limited and often traumatic. Vivien underwent several sessions of electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, which involved sending controlled electric currents through the brain to trigger seizures. Though sometimes effective in alleviating symptoms, the process was distressing and controversial, especially by modern standards. As her mental health struggles became harder to manage, they cast a long, dark shadow over her personal life and professional career. Yet through it all, Vivien continued to perform with the same intensity and brilliance that had first captured the world's attention, even as she battled an invisible enemy within. Therapies for severe mental health conditions, such as bipolar disorder, were rudimentary during Vivien Leigh's time. Electroconvulsive therapy, though one of the few available treatments, came with harsh side effects including confusion, memory loss, and visible burns near the temples. For Vivien, each session left more than just physical scars. It left her disoriented, altered, and at times almost unrecognizable to those closest to her. Friends and colleagues noted significant behavioral shifts after treatments. She seemed less like the vibrant woman they knew, and more like a shadow of herself, emotionally distant and psychologically shaken. Despite these challenges, Vivien's devotion to her craft never wavered. She continued to deliver emotionally charged performances that underscored not only her immense talent, but also her astonishing resilience in the face of personal turmoil. However, without access to more comprehensive support systems or an accurate Understanding of bipolar disorder, Vivien had to endure the weight of her illness largely alone. Her experience serves as a poignant reminder of the need for compassionate mental health care and a more nuanced appreciation for the inner battles that many suffer in silence. In 1943, while entertaining Allied troops in North Africa, Vivien fell seriously ill. It wasn't until the following year that doctors diagnosed her with tuberculosis, a disease that would never truly leave her. Though initial treatments seemed successful, the illness would resurface later in life, becoming another cruel thread in the tapestry of her declining health. After recovering, Vivien resumed acting in 1944, but her return was marked by disappointment. A string of underwhelming films and the painful loss of key roles, including the coveted lead in Rebecca, which went to Joan Fontaine, and Pride and Prejudice, fueled her growing sense of professional inadequacy. These setbacks gnawed at her confidence and contributed to her emotional instability. The pressure to meet expectations, combined with her worsening mental condition, made even daily functioning difficult. While filming Caesar and Cleopatra in 1945, tragedy struck. Vivien suffered a devastating fall while pregnant, resulting in a miscarriage. The emotional trauma from the loss plunged her into a deep and prolonged depression, exacerbating her bipolar symptoms. During this dark period, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She began engaging in impulsive sexual encounters, sometimes with strangers such as delivery men or taxi drivers, in a desperate attempt to soothe the agitation caused by her disorder. These actions strained her already fragile marriage. While on tour in Australia with Laurence Olivier, Vivien met Peter Finch, a charismatic young actor whom Olivier took under his wing. However, Finch soon became romantically involved with Vivien, creating a love triangle that further complicated her crumbling marriage. By 1948, Olivier's patience was wearing thin. The constant emotional toll of managing Vivien's wild mood swings and infidelities proved too much. Although he still loved her, the marriage had become unsustainable. Vivien's heightened libido and erratic emotional states had drained him, and he found a reluctant relief in her growing attachment to Finch. Their once glamorous partnership, once the talk of the theatrical world, was now unraveling in private pain and public silence. Amid this turmoil, Vivien was offered the role of Blanche Dubois in Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire, a character whose fragile mental state eerily mirrored her own. Blanche, a fading Southern belle haunted by delusions, loneliness, and loss, became an emotionally immersive role for Vivien. She poured every ounce of her fractured psyche into the performance. Her portrayal was lauded by critics and audiences alike, solidifying her as one of the most gifted actresses of her generation. But this deep immersion came at a terrible cost. Vivien played Blanche over 300 times on stage, each performance requiring her to step into a world of despair and psychological collapse. The boundaries between actress and character began to blur. The mental unraveling Blanche experienced started to bleed into Vivien's reality. Night after night, she relived emotional torment until it began to feel indistinguishable from her own. The weight of Blanche's pain became her own burden, pulling her deeper into the shadows of her illness. Later on, Vivien Leigh would admit that the role of Blanche Dubois had brought her dangerously close to madness. The emotional line between herself and the character had blurred to such an extent that she struggled to distinguish her own identity from that of Blanche. The performance, though universally acclaimed, had a lasting psychological cost. For Vivien, the emotional depth and vulnerability required to portray Blanche became a mirror to her own inner turmoil. Her experience serves as a haunting testament to the psychological dangers of immersive acting, particularly for those already grappling with fragile mental health. Despite her triumph in the role, the price she paid was profound. Vivien's commitment to her art, though admirable, exposed the painful truth that emotional authenticity in performance can sometimes push artists to the edge of personal collapse. When the opportunity arose to reprise Blanche in the film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire, Vivien fought hard for the part. The director initially questioned her stability and suitability, but she convinced him of her dedication. She was cast opposite Marlon Brando, who was intrigued by her but reportedly held back out of respect for his friend, Laurence Olivier. The gamble paid off. Vivien's portrayal earned her a second Academy Award. However, the psychological damage from embodying Blanche lingered, leaving her more emotionally fragile than ever. In 1953, she began filming Elephant Walk, hoping the new project would mark a positive shift. Instead, her condition deteriorated rapidly. She suffered from insomnia, paranoia, and daily hallucinations. Eventually, her behavior became so erratic that the studio replaced her with Elizabeth Taylor. Vivien, devastated, returned to Los Angeles physically and mentally exhausted. During the flight, she suffered a panic attack so intense that she tried to exit the plane mid-flight, an eerie moment that alarmed everyone present. Her behavior grew increasingly unstable. She would scream for hours in dressing rooms and fall into episodes that required sedation. Olivier, heartbroken but desperate, had her flown back to England and admitted to a psychiatric institution for 3 months. There, she underwent more rounds of electroconvulsive therapy. Despite attempts to keep the matter private, details of her breakdown leaked to the press. Her image, once pristine, became associated with tragedy and instability. Though Olivier had long endured the highs and lows of their life together, including her affair with Peter Finch, their bond began to fracture irreparably. The tension spilled into public view, with the couple engaging in thinly veiled arguments during performances. Vivien grew obsessed with negative reviews, particularly those suggesting that Olivier deliberately overshadowed her. Though he tried to reassure her, the damage was done. In 1956, she suffered another miscarriage, plunging her into another deep depression. While performing Titus Andronicus across Europe, the mental and emotional strain became unbearable. In one incident, she disrobed in a public park, lost in a dissociative state. Another time, she slapped Olivier with a wet towel during a heated exchange, leading him to physically restrain her in self-defense. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, Olivier reached his limit. Their divorce was finalized in 1960. Though Vivien quickly entered into a relationship with Jack Merivale, who became her devoted caretaker, the separation from Olivier remained a source of sorrow. Olivier, despite moving on with actress Joan Plowright, admitted that no one ever matched Vivien's heart. He ensured her well-being was in good hands, and even after their divorce, he wrote to her with tenderness and gratitude. The end of their marriage marked another turning point in Vivien's life. She began to exhibit increasingly eccentric behavior, insisting rental cars be repainted, traveling everywhere with prized Picassos and Renoirs, and growing more isolated. In Bipolar, 1963, she took on a role in Tovarich in hopes of reclaiming emotional balance through performance. Instead, the experience was harrowing. She forgot lines, lost rhythm in songs, and occasionally screamed at fellow actors mid-scene. At one point, she had to be sedated and physically restrained. Yet, astonishingly, her performance won her a Tony Award, underscoring the immense talent she still possessed despite her fragile mental state. In 1965, while filming Ship of Fools, another disturbing incident occurred. In a scene where her character was attacked, she became so absorbed that she struck co-star Lee Marvin with a high heel, leaving a permanent scar. This proved to be her final film. Her health deteriorated rapidly in the following years. The return of her tuberculosis in 1967 left her bedridden and restrained. One night, she attempted to get up and collapsed. Jack Merivale found her too late. Vivien had passed away. Upon hearing the news, Olivier rushed to her side, helping Merivale arrange her funeral. He ensured her ashes were scattered in the theater district she adored. London dimmed its lights for an hour in her memory. In the final weeks of his own life, Olivier confessed he had rewatched one of her films and wept, saying, "This was love." Vivien had once echoed that sentiment herself. She would rather have had a short life with Larry than a long one without him.